40-ish minutes. I think that should be plenty for a nice little conversation about ag and carbon. So we have a small room here live, but maybe some people have joined online or maybe people are watching later. So welcome to AIDA's pavilion at COP28. We're kicking the Ag Day off here with a conversation about carbon finance for agriculture. I will let the panelists introduce themselves first, I think, and then we can get into the conversation. So maybe I'll start from this side with Kate. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words? Yeah, and I'll pass you the microphone.
Lovely. Hello. Well, I'm saying hello to everyone looking around. My name's Kate. I'm from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and I work within our agriculture and food team. So we work with about 50 companies right the way across the ag value chain, 2 of whom are in the room today. Hello. And I lead a lot of our work relating to climate. So a big focus for us has been Scope 3 and how can we work with members to kind of unlock some of the barriers there and scale up access and finance to the projects where it matters. So nice to meet you.
Great, thanks, Kate. Yeah, Gabby, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, online and here. Gabriela Burian from Bayer. We are a multinational corporation that has pharmaceutical, consumer health, and crop science. I'm part of the crop science, the agricultural sector. And there, I'm inside the team that's responsible for strategy and sustainability. Then globally, we look in a way that we can integrate sustainability in our business. And this is where it comes, our conversation today. Happy to be here.
Great.
And Emily Pierce-Rayner. So I lead federal government affairs for Nutrien, based in Ottawa, Canada. And just to back up a little bit in that we are a relatively new company, at least in our current construct, as to where we came from and what our intersection is with this particular matter. So we are the world's largest fertilizer producer, based in Saskatoon. Our production assets span nitrogen, phosphate, and potash production, almost entirely across North America, so in Canada, the US, and Trinidad and Tobago. But our intersection with the carbon financing file really relates to our retail business. So in addition to being the world's largest fertilizer producer, we are also the world's largest agro-retailer. So that spans about 3,000 outlets in North and South America and in Australia as well, covering 500,000 growers and grower accounts. So it gives us that direct engagement with the grower on the ground. And further to that, 150 million acres that are in our stewardship. So we have aspirations to make 75 million of those acres sustainable by 2030. That's one of our key ESG commitments, and happy to talk today about some of the market-based enablers that we're establishing in order to achieve that.
Well, thank you to each of you. And yeah, good to hear a little bit more about what you're working on in this space and who you're representing. Maybe I'll kick it off first to Kate to give us a quick overview about sort of what you hear from your members broadly. I know there's 2 of them here who can sort of speak about their kind of specific experiences and what they're dealing with. But yeah, what do you hear from your members around maybe challenges in accessing finance, maybe specifically for sustainable activities in agriculture, and whether that's market-based, which is obviously, the bread and butter of what we do at AIDA, but I know there's also other kind of finance opportunities available to agriculture, the ag sector as well. So yeah, over to you, and I'll pass this mic your way. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I might start just by zooming out a little bit. So all of our work comes from the starting point of what's the role of the ag sector in reaching a 1.5 degree pathway. So basically, what do we need to do that? We need to increase emissions reductions, and we need to really scale up removals as well, which is critical and quite unique for the role that the ag sector can play. And when we think about kind of the hotspots for that, it's all around land-based activities. So it's what's happening on the farm where the food is produced and associated land use change. So when we're working with our members, that's kind of really where we're trying to zoom into, is how can we scale up that type of activity. And for most of our members who are in the ag value chain, be it colleagues who are on the panel today who are kind of upstream in the value chain, or folks who are further downstream, then they're not landowners predominantly, so that's kind of their scope 3, if you like. And that's why that's been a real focus for us in working together in terms of how do we scale up that type of activity. And I think, Ellen, you asked me to talk also a little bit about insetting and how does that fit into the conversation and offsetting, insetting. So I guess for us, when we talk about insetting, it's often been seen as a bit of an umbrella term because it can include both within value chain in the strictest sense, so something that can count towards scope 3, but it's also been used to cover beyond value chain mitigation, so investing in adjacent lands, which is obviously super critical for the ag sector, right? Because agriculture is a system. If you're just focusing on the one crop that you're sourcing or the one tree, it doesn't make sense without investment in that wider systemic or supply shed level. And the other piece about insetting is there's been a focus on credits and what could an inset credit or an inset unit look like. So sometimes insetting is used to refer to that, but sometimes it's used for other types of investments in the value chain. So for us within WBCSD, we've also, in terms of the terminology, we actually don't find ourselves talking about insetting that much. We more talk about in value chain interventions or scope 3 interventions, so we know what we're talking about, and then beyond value chain interventions. So that's kind of setting the scene a little bit. Shall I dig into some of the challenges that we've been working on with our members? Yeah.
Thanks.
So this has been a focus for our members within WBCSD for some time, but I guess in the last year, we've really been trying to lift the lid a bit on what are the barriers to scaling up Scope 3 action and what for us, because we're all about collective action and pre-competitive collaboration, what are the biggest areas for collaboration? And I think where our work focuses is on three main things which we're trying to drive forward collectively within WBCSD. The first piece is around standards and guidance. So for now, there's not a huge amount of alignment on how we are measuring emissions, reductions and removals, particularly from land use change. So that's a big need, really, to collectively work towards standards which help this measurement in a way which is feasible for business as well and in a way that they can adopt and run with. The second piece is on data and measurement. You know, the standards kind of take us so far, but the data is where we're going to operationalize all of this stuff. And right now, a lot of people are referring to this as a bit of a Wild West. Lots of companies are taking different approaches for data, tools, methods that they're using to measure the emissions reductions and removals. So what that means is, even if you're using the same standard, you might measure the impact of the same project and reach vastly different results depending on what data, what tools you're using, which presents challenges. So again, we're trying to work with members on how do we align around the protocols for data, what kind of tools we want to be using, how can that all be interoperable so we have a full picture across the value chain. And then this third piece is around incentives and engagement, and within WBCSD, we've been looking and we'll continue to look at the cost sharing element, because I think, you know, within the value chain, Scope 3, the great thing, it's a shared opportunity. You know, this is gonna, the same projects are super interesting for whether you're upstream, whether you're downstream. You know, these land-based activities really sit in the middle, so it's all of our collective priority together. So how can we unlock those cost-sharing mechanisms? And we're seeing pilots where that's happening, but we know there are real kind of structural, contractual barriers within businesses for enabling greater deployment of finance in partnership with others in the value chain. So I hope that sets the scene a little bit. That's kind of what we're seeing in terms of opportunities for collective action here.
That's great. Thanks so much, Kate. Yeah, no, really useful to hear about kind of how you're framing the insetting and offsetting kind of conversation. And I feel like I'm hearing less about insetting as well, kind of just more broadly. And I think it's certainly for me, feels more helpful and relevant to talk about in value chain versus beyond value chain. So I think that's, useful to hear that that's kind of where you guys are headed to, and also useful to hear about kind of like at a umbrella kind of scale, what you're hearing from your members and how you're kind of parsing that out into various work streams as well. Curious to hear from Emily about your kind of, just experiences in Canada. What are some of the financing opportunities there? I know there's a lot going on in the compliance space in Canada, which hopefully is providing an avenue in some ways, but also on the voluntary market. And then, yeah, I mean, Kate spoke at a high level about maybe some of the pilot activities that might be happening. So anything you're doing on that front would be great to hear about too.
So to depict this, I'll create a bit of a case study in and around Nutrien's carbon program, for which we're in our third year. We piloted it for the third year this year, and now have a verified pathway through Sustain Cert, which is a world first. And so taking a number of steps back as to how we got here, we do, as I mentioned, have an ESG commitment of 75 million sustainable acres, and further to that had a commitment to scope and scale our carbon program. So the way that it had operated in Canada, at least to date, was through the compliance system. And Alberta should be very much credited for being a world first in developing compliance protocols. In that instance, the nitrous oxide emissions reduction protocol and the conservation cropping protocol. So one, a nitrogen management protocol, the other being related to no and zero till. So, you know, the challenge with uptake and the barriers to uptake were plainly seen to us at Nutrien. And so we had worked with the government of Alberta to at least attempt to make revisions to still have a credit with integrity, but allowing for adoption within that system. And truth be told, it is I mean, we've seen a lot of it over the dialogue during this week. They are very under-resourced for the challenges that are before them, particularly in their energy sector right now, and this just proved to not be a priority. Having said that, it's a priority for us. Our Scope 3 footprint is vast compared to our Scope 1 and 2, and certainly need to solve for it. So we decided to take these protocols in-house and create this carbon program to really model a market as to, how can we solve for these challenges, and really make it scalable in a global setting. And so we were quite agnostic as to where the carbon program is going to land, and said to governments, we will derive these lessons and share them back with you. But we also wanted to make something that was functional in the voluntary space as well. And so what outcomes came from the first 2 years of pilots were, one, that the credits need to be stackable, so there needs to be something of a high enough value to create a return for the grower. The other is that the administrative barriers need to be low, and that's not to sacrifice integrity at all. It's to ensure that the digital tools that growers are now using are there to make it really streamlined and straightforward for the grower. So again, we now have a verified pathway through Sustain Cert, which is very, very exciting for us. Additionally, have sold in the offset market credits to Climate Action Reserve, which has been purchased by RBC, which is one of our partners in the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agriculture, which is a thread that I'm certainly happy to draw from. But just circling back circling back to the inset point, I think what's really driven the carbon program in Canada, and I'll say, we've got 1 million acres in North America that are now under the carbon program, and about 450,000 of those are in Canada, which, given our relative agricultural space, is quite significant. And the driver for that is our partnership with Maple Leaf Foods, which is one of the biggest animal processors in Canada, who have a net zero commitment, but we're looking to partner with us to create an inset to decarbonize the feed that they're feeding their livestock. And so in working with them, we've been able to establish a really true partnership and to grow that to our mutual benefit. And now that we've got this verified pathway, are looking for new partners to scale this globally. As I mentioned at the outset, our geography spans North and South America, Australia as well. We do have that direct connection with 500,000 grower accounts and 150 million acres. I think that makes us very unique in this space, as we're, I believe, the only input, at least in the fertilizer world, the only input provider to have that retail relationship. And so very excited as to where we can take that. So happy to pull on the Kanza thread and partnerships that we have financially, but that's a bit of an overview as to where we stand with the carbon program.
That's great. Thanks so much, Emily. Always useful to get that kind of case study perspective and hear more about the details on that, and certainly would love to hear about Kanza down the line in this panel as well. I'll pass over to you, Gabby, to hear about your experiences at Bayer and maybe kind of drawing on some of the regional experiences you have and activities that you're up to as well on this, carbon finance for agriculture. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. Yes, in the taking notes here, we are all facing challenges very similar, right? And then good to have more people to share our ways. Then, starting from the beginning, Bayer has the commitment to be 30% less GHG by 2030, and also, of course, reducing 30% in environmental impact and increasing the engagement and empowerment of 100 million smallholders, all by 2030. What does it mean? This means that when we go to what we do, that's more complementary to what, for those that are not so aware, we are kind of complementary to Nutrien. Then we have websites, we have data, digital, etc. Then we work very close, but in different areas. Then for us, again, the scope 3 is the biggest part. Then for all own operations, we will be carbon neutral by 2030, and we are working on it. But in fact, the 30% reduction in our scope 3 is where the challenge is, right? And the opportunities at the same time. Then the way we defined to approach this challenge that we have on our hands was first to go together with others, then a collaboration, and we work with World Business Council very much, with FAITA and the SBTI and everyone else that can bring science, because integrity in this process is crucial, right? There is a fine line where you are working, when you are working with farmers, reducing their carbon and not having yet the standards. The fine line is how the society perceives what you are doing. Then the transparency for us is crucial, and the way then we are doing this is ensuring first there is data, information, we have an agreement that that information is the farmer's information, but we aggregate it in a way that we can evaluate how are we doing in terms of reduction of CO2. For what's in there for farmers, right? This is the biggest challenge. The way we are doing is ensuring they have capacity building provided by our agronomists, also ensuring they can receive a small amount, but this is what we can provide now. The market is not yet where we believe it will be, but we are working with farmers to ensure they can receive for the practices that they are implementing, right? Then no-till, to be very specific, no-till, cover crop, what I'm missing, data, then if they start to leverage the data, and of course the basic that they need to be, of course, environmental and social, okay with everything that we have in the agreement to start to join the program. Nowadays we have more than 3,000 growers already part of this process. And one interesting point that I believe is pretty much complementary is we are working in United States and Brazil. In Brazil, because we need to make tropical what we have in the northern hemisphere. And this is where we really need to think together. Because in the past, always countries like Brazil, and I'm from there, then I know firsthand, we used to receive methodologies coming from the northern hemisphere, but not adapt to our soil, to our climate, etc. And this doesn't work well. Then what we are doing in Brazil is with a big collaboration, more than 7 universities, academia. This is why I was like, everyone is welcome. We have been working with industry and collaboration with everyone to evaluate how can we ensure the integrity is there in a way that we can comply with everything and at the same time ensure the farmer can access to what they deserve because they are implementing this. Sometimes we don't realize there is investment that the farm needs to be doing. Then the first years when they are implementing no-till, cover crop, right in the beginning, they cannot harvest what they were harvesting before. After some years, yes, it will come back, the yield, but in the beginning, no. Then this is something that we sometimes need to take a moment and think, if you were a farmer, would you take the challenge to invest something and not harvest the first year, not harvesting the second year, but really in the hope that the market will be there. Then our vision is, yes, the farmers will be able to harvest crops, harvest data, harvest ecosystem services, harvest the carbon credits. But this is not yet there. Then what we are doing now in this sector that I love so much, agriculture, is an awesome transition. That is bringing together those, like those that are here and the farmers on the ground, that believe that we can make this happen. But at this moment, there is no standardization, nobody's paying, consumers are not ready to be with us yet. But this is where we need absolutely to think together and say, how can we ensure the standardization will be happening and we'll be able to provide what's necessary for the consumer to trust what agriculture sector is doing, right? Thank you, Ellen.
Great. Thanks so much, Gabriella. Appreciate that. Maybe, Kate, if you can, I mean, Gabriella brought up some really important challenges that are being faced at least in Bayer's experience, but I think obviously you're kind of working across, with partners in the space, but also academia and others as well. So I'm sure you have a good sense of, more broadly what's going on and what's challenging people. Is there anything you wanted to raise around other challenges that you're hearing? And I know you sort of talked about some of the areas that you're focusing on to address some of those challenges, but anything you wanted to add on that front. And I think one thing I have in mind, I guess, that I hear and have heard from others, and I think maybe in some ways it's not unique to agriculture, but obviously curious to hear about it in the context of agriculture, is like this almost like competing internal interest around like how do you balance trying to do things within your value chain versus beyond value chain. There's obviously various kind of access points or opportunities to finance these activities. Like how are you hearing about companies who are trying to make the most of what they're being presented with in terms of those opportunities? Like how does that how are you, what are you hearing, I guess?
Honestly, this is one of the hot topics that we hear from members all the time when they're working towards their climate strategies, and it can be challenging given where we are at the moment with the development of standards and which are not yet finalized to help companies navigate that. And I guess specifically what I'm referring to mainly is the work on the GHG protocol, land sector removals guidance, which is a really big piece of the puzzle. It's going to be the first guidance to help companies account for emissions from land-based activities and from removals. It's still in development until the end of next year. And what that should work towards is giving clarity towards what enables something to be counted as within the value chain and be counted towards Scope 3, and how do we draw the lines in terms of allocating carbon benefits from a farm level right the way through to a product level, what kind of chain of custody models are applicable for doing that. So that will unlock a piece of the puzzle, but I think, as you said, this there's a real recognition from companies around the importance of investing not just on pure Scope 3 projects, which are great, they'll count towards your SBTIs. There's a clear business case for doing that internally for companies who've made that ambition. But also the critical importance of landscape level investment into beyond value chain pieces, which won't count towards your SBTI, but it doesn't mean that they're not important for the functioning of your supply chain and your value chain and building that resilience. So I think there's an understanding that both are important. There's a real drive towards getting these standards sorted. It is interesting. I think that you've both talked about the measurement piece, and obviously that's a really important piece of the puzzle, because the ability to measure, and it's not, accounting for accounting's sake and getting drawn into that process, but it's accounting with a real drive towards action, and how does this accounting give us decision relevant data which can help us put the money where it matters. So I think that the measurement piece does really unlock action, and that's what we're seeing in our work. But I think the other thing I would just add is a lot of the discussions we've been having have had this notion of not letting perfection be the enemy of progress. We know there's a lot of work to do with the standards. There's some unanswered questions about the data, but we also know what needs to be done. We know what the hotspots are. So we need to do that in a credible way, but we also need to start acting on that now, rather than pushing this down the line to when we have super finalized standards or aligned data points. So we'd just add that.
Great, thank you. Emily, was there anything you wanted to kind of build on in terms of just the challenges that you might be facing, whether it's around just, unclear standards or, what opportunities to pursue versus not pursue? Yeah, keen to hear about your views on that.
Yeah, again, I think here there are a couple of threads to pull on that my colleagues have presented, but I'll start with the measurement piece. So this is something that we're seeking to solve for. Again, regulators have many standards and hurdles to cross, but we're going to be accountable to this far sooner. So as an example of, at least trying to solve for this, we did launch nationally perhaps about a month ago, but globally this morning at the Canadian Pavilion, the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agri-Food. And our project within that is to create a measurement, reporting, and verification system in Canada for agriculture. And so we've been piloting that with a grower out of Saskatchewan named Christian Hebert, who has been quite advanced. I mean, you can ask him for data on his phone back to the 90s as to his application practices, soil sampling and what have you, and he's got that at the ready. But the challenge will be how do you keep the grower in mind once a framework is established to enable uptake? And there's a significant role for, I think, government, and frankly, rarely do I think there's a role for government to enable these things, but there will be barriers to uptake in terms of hardware and software costs that can be enabled through that process. I mean, just to depict the challenge that we have in Canada and even the public dialogue in and around fertilizer emissions, there was a target ascribed in 2020 by the federal government to reduce fertilizer use emissions by 30% by 2030. And so my rebuttal to that always is 30% of what? Because the measurement under the national inventory currently is rate and moisture based on geography. It doesn't capture any of the 4R nutrient stewardship practices that are adopted by many growers, although I think in our auditing there's a bit of a gap between grower perception of how advanced they are in terms of 4R and what the reality is, which is why we're looking to create this incentive program. But as time goes on and we're not able to fully capture, the good practices that many growers are doing, be it, environmentally sustainable nitrogen, broadcast versus banding, variable rate, all those great things that are for our practices and embedded in their business because it makes economic sense. What then becomes the public perception of agriculture if we can't point to a common understanding and data point? So we've been working hard on that. Again, just to pull on a couple more of these threads, but keeping the grower in mind when we're developing these programs. I think a lot of the dialogue has been, as we go through the food system and the value chain as to what can be done on the farm and ensuring that all players in the value chain are taking responsibility for those emissions, because the ag portion, the grower portion, is the most disaggregated part of this business, right? If we ourselves are dealing with 500,000 growers, I can probably count the major food companies on two hands, right? It would be easier to start to address it at that macro level before we get down into the micro. And then finally, ensuring that when we're talking about these carbon outcomes, we're doing so with integrity. I think that there's been a lot of conflation, particularly in an attempt to, demonstrate that growers are advanced and they know their 4R practices to speak to, in Canada we have an awareness survey to depict how many acres are under 4R. As carbon accounting advances, that's not going to be good enough. And my concern is that this is going to be a conversation that's ripe for greenwashing or accusations of greenwashing, which is why we've tried to broach this with the utmost integrity in getting a verified pathway and being quite public in our accounting and our outcomes, because I think we all stand to lose if there's a perception that growers aren't doing the right thing because the data isn't, common and standardized and well understood. So that's a lot of issues for us to tackle, but I think we're all on the same page in terms of identifying those problems and attempting to solve for them. And I think these dialogues through World Business Council and other organizations are great to creating that sort of standardized process and or at least, sharing opportunities and challenges. So that's what kind of the challenges as we see right now. 3 of many.
Perfect. No, thanks, Emily. And while I don't want to leave things on a note of just challenges, I am keen to open it to the floor of our small but dedicated audience here in the room with us. So I'm just going to run to the back and get a mic, but think of questions while I do that, and then we can come back to the panel to sort of wrap up on some of the things that you're excited to see maybe down the line in the future, and maybe what you would like to see from AIDA too to support that, and WBCSD too, and maybe there's opportunity for us to work together. But Yes, I will be right back.
Do I sing a song or do a dance? Nobody wants to hear that, trust me.
Are there questions in the room at all? Now that I've gone through all the trouble to get you, no, I'm just kidding. Here, yeah, go ahead, please. Thanks.
Well, you've been talking a lot about those standards that are being put in place or being worked on right now that should give us better information by the end of next year. But can you be more specific about the standards who is working on standards right now? I heard some, but there seems to be more than what I thought. So I would be curious to hear you about those standards.
Let me just jump in. Yeah. Yes, when we think about the ecosystem of Scope 3 accounting for the agri-food value chain, like if we tried to map it, it would become pretty extensive. There's so much happening with standards development, new data, MRV providers popping up all the time. So it's super exciting, super fast moving, but also quite difficult to navigate. I hear you. I guess from a standards side, some of the big ones that we're tracking. So the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which I mentioned, which is co-convened by WRI and WBCSD, which for many years has set the bar for corporate level, mainly corporate level greenhouse gas reporting. So they have standards already, as you many of you know, covering Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. This new land sector and removals guidance. So previously there hasn't been any guidance for land-based emissions and for emissions removals, which is quite unique to the agriculture sector. So it's a bit of a first, but obviously there's a lot of hugely technical challenges which the team is grappling with in the development of that standard. So we're excited to see where that lands. So that's a big one. I think the other interesting ones that we're tracking are players who've been active in the carbon market space around Verra and Gold Standard, who are looking to apply, lessons learned from some of the standards and methodologies for offsetting, and how do we apply this to something that could be used within Scope 3. So Verra is working on the development of a Scope 3 standard as well. So those are some of the big ones from the standards and guidance piece that we're tracking and working closely on. I won't dive into all the data MRV side, which is super exciting, but a very busy space. If anyone wants to add any...
We work exactly with those. Yes. Yes, for us also Verra, Gold Standard, and the GHG Protocol, absolutely, yes. Also, sorry, just in terms of reporting, then TCFD, right? We have been also working with them, TCFD. Then our first report with them was like 2 years ago or so.
No, nothing.
Maybe just one other is the SBTI flag too, right? So the Science Based Targets Initiative, forest, land, agriculture. I can't remember the exact acronym, but SBTI flag is another kind of one of those big overarching kind of pathways for the agriculture sector as well.
I'm happy also to send to you this ecosystem, because our team has been really mapping out and working with everyone that's out there, and of course together with others. Then we can absolutely make sure you have visibility in a way that we can kind of complement each other, right? See the synergies.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I see that. I've seen that. We have a beautiful map. One piece that I just want to complement related to this is crucial, right, when we talk about standard, and that only the answer is already something like, wow, right? There is a lot. And the fact that we are at COP, we needed to use the opportunity, right? And remember, trade is a basic thing that we need in agriculture, right? You are from Canada, Quebec, then you need the food in some moments of your life that there is no possibility to produce there. Then trade is something that we need to remember is absolutely crucial for life, for food security. So the standards are necessary to be in a way that they are aligned among different countries. Then I'm bringing COP because now we are discussing NDCs, right? The goals for each country. And in a moment of transition, we need to remember that the flexible regulatory process is crucial. Then clear, we need the clear. We cannot, as producers, we cannot work in an environment that there is no clear rules. And that's in time flexible and transparent, that can connect across the world, right? Then just to make the point that we have this in our mind since we are here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. And thank you for this interesting conversation. So I just want to add something about this question because I'm from a standard, Olmex. We are a member of FAIEDA, and we are a new standard based on regenerative agriculture. So if you want, we can have a little discussion later on. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one more question. Sorry, did you want?
I thought you wanted to maybe to comment on the... No? Okay.
No, yeah, just appreciate that remark, and yeah, glad you're here.
So the conference is about finance and agriculture and carbon markets and carbon finance and agriculture, sorry. And so suppose we have the standards, then all right. To me, the big issue is, okay, what makes the producers move and change the habits? So let's forget the standards, and we have the MRVs and all that. We understand that it's going to have to come. But to me, the big issue is, why are the producers going to change their way of doing things, and what are we going to put in place in terms of economic models so they will change their way of doing things?
Yeah, so I mean, this is back to my comment about disaggregation in the market. I mean, we truly are dealing with growers at the farm gate who need to annually do these practices in order to make a Scope 3 reduction. This isn't something a one and done. It needs to be enabled. So going back to our carbon program, our conclusions that it needs to be stackable, so that the incentive needs to be lucrative enough, and it needs to have lesser of an administrative burden than perhaps has been prescribed by these protocols in the past. That's step one. But we've looked, I mean, this is like anything as it relates to reducing our carbon emissions. We need to use every conceivable tool in our toolbox. So additionally, we at Nutrien have worked with Scotiabank, which is one of the largest ag lenders, as you would well know, in Canada, so that if our grower is demonstrating for our practices with a verified for our nutrient stewardship plan signed off on by a certified agronomist, their interest rate goes from 12.99%, I think that's the forecasted rate, to 4.99%. And further to that, their payment date becomes later. I believe it's an end of year payment deadline, and it would be pushed out until the end of February. So that's something that we've launched. The government's tried to solve for this as well, and I would say that they're at a very, they wanted to quickly address the problem, but the mechanism that has been employed to incentivize first-time product purchase or practice adoption has been a little bit cumbersome, and I think that there's been some reflection on that. But our approach has been, if we present government with what we're doing, and they can see that we're an actor, who's trying to achieve the same goals as them, perhaps there's an off-road into these more market-based mechanisms in which you bring in the massive amount of private sector investment that is there, it's ready. I mean, the offset market itself, could leverage billions of dollars in terms of investment at the farm gate. How does government work in tandem with that rather than working at odds and trying to solve for all these problems on very finite budgets relative to what could be available? So it really, I mean, look, our growers are business owners. This all comes down to money and making economic sense for them. So that's the lens through which we see it.
Yes, and I can complement, you are absolutely right? Finance is crucial, otherwise this will not be done. Then what we are doing in our program, if you can go to the website, it's Foreground. Then the grower register there and they can receive, applying everything that we are suggesting to become regenerative agriculture, they receive $6 per acre per year. This is the amount now that we are giving part of this program. still, again, this is a transition, right? This is not a sustainable thing if you don't have the end consumer paying, etc., and how the finance process well defined. For now, we are doing this program that has been, in fact, very interesting in terms of attraction of growers. They are interested to see how they can be part of this process that's helping to sequester the carbon and at the same time ensuring they are viable financially speaking, right?
Great. Well, I think we should probably move to some closing thoughts. So maybe I'll start back with you, Kate, and we can.
Could I ask another question? Is it possible?
Sure. Do you have
I was just so
time?
curious to hear you about that. In Quebec right now, and I guess it's the same thing everywhere in the world, but the producers are being approached by companies that say they can quantify the carbon in the soil, and so they want the producers to sign them a term sheet or a contract in which they commit themselves to give their carbon to that company for 10 years or so. And agricultural producers, the growers, they don't know what to do with that. And now there's, of course, this possibility that is offered to them. And also they know that they could sell their potential offsets to the petroleum sector in the future. At the same time, they have their cooperative or their the company that buys their product that tells them, well, don't sell those credits because we want them in our value chain. We want to keep them in the value chain. So the producers is kind of confused, and rightfully, because there's many opportunities that he doesn't understand that are being offered to him, and some of them commit already to something that won't make sense for them. What would you suggest to the producers that are being confronted to those offers that are being made to them?
Thanks. No, that's such an important question, and I know it's a big, big challenge in this space. So, happy for any comments.
You are absolutely right. This is it has been a big challenge, and in my opinion, the world outside of agriculture doesn't have any idea about the challenge that we are facing now in our sector, right? Because this is totally true. There is also, I would add, because there is a lot of mentions related to this carbon market and a very few things on the ground, really, right, that it's tangible. Also regions, very specific regions, where is it, where is not. Then my answer to the growers, and we have been working with them, is this requires partnership, right? It requires trust. There is no way for any growers to go in any direction if they don't have a trust in the process. And the same from our side, right? I'm seeing here some people with regenerative agricultural landscape. Then we need to ensure there is a clear and transparent conversation, and trust needs to be the base. Without this, nothing is possible. Then my suggestion would be only with partnership and the trust, you can go ahead and define what's better for you. But absolutely, of course, we need always to check what's out there and how this market is going ahead. It's really something that we are able to do, but only together. And this is why I was really keen about this panel. Thank you, Aita. Because if we don't take a moment to think about that together with those that are really valuing this process, we will not get there. But together we can. Then for them, I would say, call the person that they trust, the company, the organization that they trust. Doesn't matter which one, but this one that has been with them for many years. And this is where they will be able to build the bridge, in my opinion. And thank you so much, everyone. I use the opportunity to finalize. Thank you, Aita. Thank you, the World Business Council, Nutrien, and everyone that's here, because everyone matters, in fact, right? As we can see, we need more and more. Then count on us, and the collaboration is crucial. Then thank you so much, and more to come for sure. I hope this conference can bring it to agriculture sector more good news. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thanks so much, Gabriela. I appreciate that, and I think that was some nice advice to end on as well. Kate, I'll pass to you for some of your closing thoughts. I don't know if you wanted to speak to something maybe more on the, opportunities, kind of bringing in through that positive thread that Gabriela has kicked us off on. But yeah, anything you're excited to see in the future, hearing from your members around what they're working on that might be, of interest to those in the room or listening in. Go ahead.
Key takeaways. I mean, a lot of the work that WBCSD has been doing in this space is focusing on the measurement side, but I guess the key message is around measurement as an enabler of change, so enabling us to finance better where it matters and finance the things that work. The second key theme, and it's been great that we've heard a lot around equity, and we really need this to happen in a way that works for farmers. It's no good us dreaming up standards in a room totally isolated from what's happening on the farm. It needs to be done in a way that's going to work for farmers, reduce the administrative burden. I really liked how you were talking about that. And I guess from our side within WBCSD, the work we're doing is all around fostering collective action. So a big focus for us at this COP has been the action area on regenerative landscapes, which was announced towards the start of the 2 weeks, and that's really about fostering collaboration in these landscapes, which are really critical in terms of investing in the agricultural transition. So we're really hoping that that's going to be an unlock for greater collaboration towards deploying finance to some of these solutions.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. And Emily, over to you for some final thoughts.
We have two foremost challenges in our business right now. One is to produce crops sustainably. The other is to feed the world. And in the dialogue, I've been here since November 30th. I'm wearing bags under my eyes as an outcome. But I think that abundance aspect and the fact that we have millions of people who continue to be food insecure in this world tends to get lost in the discussion. So let's make sure that we're solving for both problems simultaneously. And this is, I think we all share this common goal. But as you go off into the world and enjoy your agriculture thematic day, make sure that aspect is brought into the discussion, because we're doing ourselves no favors and feeding, frankly, one of the biggest drivers in our business over the last 2 years has been geopolitics. A lot of those geopolitical circumstances are an outcome of food insecurity. There's plenty of history correlating the two. So let's make sure that that's a prominent part of the dialogue. A bit of a pivot there, but important nonetheless.
No, I really appreciate that, Emily. That's an important note to end on. And maybe if I can just tease out 3 sort of themes I heard from this panel so far. I think trust was a really important one, alignment on, across standards, but also kind of across the whole community that's working in this space, and then cooperation as well. So maybe some things we can carry into 2024. And thanks so much to my panelists. Really appreciate you coming out on one of the last days, bright and early. But it was a real privilege to be on the panel with all of you and really hear more deeply about what you're working on, some of the challenges you're facing, and certainly keen for AIDA to, play a supportive role as we move forward around these challenges and trying to access that finance to get this sector kind of moving forward towards 2030 goals of 2050. So thanks again. Thanks to those of you who are able to join in the room as well. And we can leave it here. Thanks, everyone.